Map. I inherited 1,100 acres, only to find an entire HOA living on it. They called me a trespasser, until one buried marker exposed the fraud beneath every home. Welcome back, everyone. Before today's story begins, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story is released. Your support means more than you know. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing incredible stories with viewers around the world. And before we begin, tell me this: where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's dive into today's unforgettable story. You inherited the forest, Mr. Avery. You did not inherit our community. Celeste Barrington said it while standing beneath a sign her people had nailed into my grandfather's oak tree. It was 5:52 in the morning. Each hammer strike echoed through the Tennessee woods like a rifle crack. Cold mist hung between the pines. My boots sank into wet leaves as I stepped from my truck, and the smell of fresh-cut lumber mixed with exhaust from a white security SUV idling near the tree line. Two men in Briarhaven Ridge uniforms were fastening a polished black sign to the trunk. Private property trespassers will be prosecuted. I had inherited that oak. I had inherited the road beneath their tires. According to the deed inside my jacket, I had inherited every inch of land behind them. What are you doing? I asked. One worker stopped hammering. The other looked toward the SUV. A woman stepped out before either man answered. Celeste wore a cream wool coat, black gloves, and boots too clean for the mud. Silver blonde hair framed a face polished by money and absolute confidence. She carried a leather document case beneath one arm. Her perfume reached me through the pine air. Sharp, floral, expensive. You must be Nolan Avery, she said. Her smile was controlled, almost sympathetic. You know who I am? Our attorney warned us the estate might send someone. The estate. She said it like my family had become a paperwork problem. I looked past her. The old fire road curved through the trees toward a stone entrance I had never seen before. Beyond it stood rows of large homes with gray roofs, white fences, and porch lights glowing through the fog. A clubhouse rose above an artificial pond. Tennis courts occupied the hillside where my Uncle Tobias once stacked cedar logs after winter storms. A bronze sign read, Briarhaven Ridge, a private residential community. 73 houses stood on land I had visited as a boy. Celeste watched me take it in. This development has been here for 13 years, she said. You cannot appear with an outdated family document and frighten homeowners. I removed the certified deed from my jacket. She never looked at it. Instead, she raised two fingers. The security men moved closer. I'm here to inspect 1,100 acres transferred to me through my uncle's estate. You inherited undeveloped timberland west of our boundary. My deed says otherwise. Her smile thinned. A sheriff's cruiser rolled around the stone entrance, blue lights flashing silently against the mist. Celeste had called before I arrived. The deputy stepped out and asked for identification. I handed him my license and the deed. Celeste handed him a court-stamped property map in a clear plastic sleeve. His eyes moved between the documents. This needs to be settled through the courts. Beneath the clear water, partly hidden by moss and white gravel, something bronze caught the rising light. A survey cap. I stepped closer. Celeste blocked my path. You were told to leave. I crouched just enough to read the engraving beneath the moving water. A44. My grandfather had driven that marker into the eastern ridge in 1969. I had seen it in family photographs, beside the same oak tree now carrying Celeste's warning sign. The deputy touched my shoulder. I stood and walked back toward my truck without saying another word. Celeste believed the silence meant she had won. But as I opened the door, I looked once more at a 44 beneath her waterfall. She had built an entire entrance around the one piece of evidence that could bring her community down. The map on the county website said my family had lost 238 acres without selling a single foot of it. I discovered that 3 hours after Celeste had me removed from Briarhaven Ridge. My uncle's cabin stood on the western side of the property, beyond 2 locked cattle gates and a gravel road swallowed by pine needles. The roof sagged near the chimney. Wind chimes clicked against the porch, though nobody had lived there since Tobias entered hospice. When I opened the door, The smell hit me first. Sawdust, chainsaw oil, damp wool, coffee burned into the bottom of an old metal pot. His red flannel shirt still hung from a nail beside the stove. A pair of muddy logging boots waited beneath it, toes pointed toward the door as if he might return before sunset. I set the certified deed on his kitchen table and opened my laptop. The inheritance documents were clear. 1,100 acres. The county's digital parcel system showed 862. I refreshed the page twice. Same number. The eastern boundary formed a clean rectangle around Briarhaven Ridge, cutting across the old fire road and stopping at the creek. 238 acres had been separated from Avery land and assigned a different parcel identification number. No transfer date appeared. No sale price. No signature from Tobias. The land had not changed hands. It had changed color on a computer screen. My grandfather used to warn me about maps made by people who had never walked the ground. He said a line on a screen could lie more easily than a fence post because nobody expected pixels to leave fingerprints. I printed the county map and placed it beside the deed. The descriptions did not match. The deed followed stone markers, creek bends, and measured bearings recorded decades before Briarhaven existed. The digital map ignored all of them. Its eastern line ran straight through terrain no surveyor would have described that way. I went into Tobias's workshop. Dust floated through the narrow beams of afternoon light. Handsaws hung above a scarred workbench. Survey chains, marking paint, and rusted forestry tools filled the shelves. In the corner stood a long wooden case secured with 2 brass latches. Inside, beneath a roll of orange flagging tape, I found a leather-filled book and 3 metal film canisters. One canister was labeled East Ridge, 1969. The old projector sat beneath the workbench, wrapped in canvas. It took 20 minutes to clean the lens and another 10 to make the motor turn without screaming. Then the workshop wall flickered to life. My grandfather appeared in grainy color, younger than I had ever known him. He stood beside the oak tree from that morning, one boot resting near a newly installed bronze marker. A44. Behind him, the eastern ridge stretched empty beneath a blue summer sky. No stone entrance. No waterfall. No houses. The film jumped. Tobias appeared decades later, walking the same boundary with a tax receipt in one hand and a compass in the other. He pointed toward the ridge, then looked directly into the camera. If someone ever tells you this land was abandoned, he said, ask them who kept paying the taxes. The projector clicked as the film reached its end. I opened the field book. Every annual tax payment was recorded in Tobias's handwriting. Every boundary inspection. Every repaired fence. Every controlled timber cut. The final entry was dated 4 months before his death. He had written only 7 words. Briarhaven survey crew returned. They know it's ours. I sat in the projector's fading light, listening to the reel spin against empty film. Celeste had told the deputy my family abandoned the ridge. But Tobias had inspected it, maintained it, and paid taxes on it until the year he died. Someone had not discovered forgotten land. Someone had erased an owner who never left. Who exactly did you serve with notice of the lawsuit? That was the question Celeste Barrington refused to answer. 3 nights after I found Tobias's film, Briarhaven Ridge held what Celeste called a community protection briefing. By 6:30, the clubhouse parking lot was full. Television vans crowded the curb. Porch lights burned across the subdivision, and rainwater shone on the road like black glass. Maren Holt met me beneath the entrance awning. She was a property attorney from Knoxville, compact, silver-eyed, and so calm she made angry people sound foolish without raising her voice. I reviewed the court file, she said. Do not accuse anyone yet. Ask simple questions and let them choose the lies. Inside, the clubhouse smelled of damp coats, lemon polish, and coffee that had been cooking too long. Families filled every chair. Children sat against their parents. Retired couples clutched folders of mortgage documents. Celeste stood beneath a wall-sized photograph of Briarhaven at sunset. She wore a navy suit and a small American flag pin. 2 residents stood beside her, a military widow and an elderly man using an oxygen tank. She had arranged the room before I arrived. Not for facts, for fear. 13 years ago, she began, Eastbrook Land Holdings rescued this abandoned ridge and created a safe, thriving community. A screen behind her displayed photographs of playgrounds, Christmas parties, and children riding bicycles. Now Nolan Avery is using an outdated family claim to threaten everything you built. Faces turned toward me. A woman near the front whispered, "He wants our homes." Celeste let the sentence spread before pretending to correct it. "We hope Mr. Avery will act responsibly, but we must prepare for every possibility." Then she displayed the document that mattered. A court order stamped 13 years earlier. Quiet title judgment. According to the order, Eastbrook had petitioned the court to establish ownership of the Eastern Ridge after the previous owners failed to respond. The judge entered a default judgment. Eastbrook recorded the property, divided it, and began construction. It looked official. That was the dangerous part. I stepped toward the aisle microphone. Celeste's smile stiffened. "I have one question." "This is a resident meeting," she said. "You used my name for 20 minutes. I think I get one question." The room quieted. I looked at the judgment on the screen. Who exactly did Eastbrook serve with notice of the lawsuit? Celeste folded her hands. The Avery family received all legally required notice. Which Avery? Our attorneys handled service. Give me the name. The HOA's lawyer rose from the front row. Grant Whitlock was tall, narrow, and wore a charcoal suit with a red tie pulled too tight around his throat. Mr. Avery, service was reviewed and approved by the court. That still isn't a name. A few residents shifted in their chairs. Celeste tapped the podium. "You are attempting to confuse homeowners with technicalities." "No," I said. "I'm asking who was told my family's land was being taken." Grant moved toward the microphone. "This meeting is concluded for non-residents." Two security officers approached. Marin touched my elbow. "Leave," she said quietly. "She just gave us what we needed." Outside, the rain had hardened into sleet. Water rattled against the metal awning while Marin opened the court file on her tablet. She scrolled to the certificate of service. Her expression changed. "What?" She turned the screen toward me. The notice had been addressed to Tobias Avery at a house demolished 3 years before the lawsuit. Below it was a signed delivery confirmation dated 11 days after Tobias's recorded death. I stared at the signature. It did not say Tobias Avery. It said Lester Avery. There had never been a Lester Avery in our family. Marin zoomed in on the identification number listed beside the name. "I'll verify this tonight," she said, "but I've seen enough." Behind us, applause rose inside the clubhouse as Celeste promised the residents she would protect them. Marin locked the screen. "Eastbrook didn't win that land because your family failed to appear," she said. "They invented someone who could fail to appear for you." The judge believed our evidence and still ordered me off the land. That was the part nobody warned me about. Marin and I entered the Hawthorne County Courthouse with Tobias's tax records, the original deed, the film of A44, and the delivery notice signed by a man who had never existed. Celeste arrived with 6 HOA board members and 3 families carrying framed photographs of their homes. The courtroom smelled of wet wool, floor polish, and old paper. Rain tapped against the tall windows while Grant Whitlock described Briarhaven as a stable community facing an aggressive ownership claim. He never called the documents genuine. He called the neighborhood established. Marin placed the false service record before the judge. "Your Honor, Eastbrook obtained its judgment by notifying a deceased man at a demolished address. The person who supposedly accepted delivery does not appear in any Avery family record." The judge studied the page. "This is deeply concerning." Hope moved through me like heat. Then he looked toward the families seated behind Celeste. "But 73 households cannot be placed in immediate legal uncertainty without a complete title review." His order preserved the existing conditions. I could not enter the disputed 238 acres, interfere with the road or utilities, contact contractors, or conduct an independent survey without court approval. Celeste could continue operating Briarhaven while the case proceeded. The gavel struck once. She had used a dead man to take our land, and the court still gave her the keys. Outside, reporters waited beneath the stone columns. "Mr. Avery, will you force these families out?" "No." "Will you close their only road?" "No." "Then why continue the lawsuit?" "Because someone sold property they did not own." That answer never made the evening broadcast. The headline did. "Heir threatens Briarhaven homes." By morning, 2 forestry clients canceled management contracts. A third said the controversy made me look unstable. Someone spray-painted land thief across the gate near Tobias's cabin. Celeste's offer arrived before noon. A courier placed a black folder on the kitchen table. Inside was a settlement agreement, a confidentiality clause, and a check for $240,000. I had 48 hours to surrender every claim, destroy copies of the Avery records, and promise never to question Briarhaven's title again. Marin, read the final page. She is not buying the land, she said. She is buying your silence. I tore the check through Celeste's signature and dropped both halves into the wood stove. The paper curled black at the edges. At dusk, tires crunched outside the cabin. Claire Donnelly stood on the porch wearing hospital scrubs beneath a raincoat. Her hair was damp, and she held a brass house key between two fingers. I work nights, she said. My son is 8. He sleeps in the room facing the woods. She entered without waiting for permission and placed the key on Tobias's table. The metal clicked against the wood. Do I still own the bedroom he sleeps in? The question carried more weight than every document in the courthouse. I looked at the key, then at the fear she was trying not to show. You bought that house honestly. That isn't what I asked. I pushed the key back toward her. No one is taking your son's room. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Celeste says you will lock the road if you win. Celeste needs you frightened enough to defend her. Claire stared at the torn settlement burning behind the stove glass. What are you going to do? I'm going to prove who created the false title. Then I'm going to make them pay to fix it. She closed her hand around the key. Before leaving, she placed a folded HOA invoice on the table. Every Briarhaven homeowner had been charged a monthly land security fee for 13 years. At the bottom, the payment recipient was not Eastbrook. It was a private company controlled by Celeste Barrington. The man who accepted notice of our land lawsuit had been dead for 9 years. Marin confirmed it the morning after Claire left Tobias's cabin. The identification number beside Lester Avery belonged to a factory worker named Leonard Voss, buried in Kentucky before Eastbrook filed its quiet title case. He had no connection to Tennessee, my family, or the demolished address listed on the delivery form. Someone had borrowed a dead man's identity and invented a living Avery around it. Marin spread the court records across Tobias's kitchen table. Rain tapped against the windows. The land security invoice Claire had given me lay beside the forged signature. This is how they built the default judgment, she said. They created someone to receive notice, then waited for that person not to respond. I read the process server's affidavit again. It claimed a middle-aged man with gray hair answered the door at 4:17 p.m., identified himself as Lester Avery, and accepted the documents without objection. The house had been demolished 3 years earlier. County photographs showed an empty foundation surrounded by weeds on the exact date of service. Marin found the process server in a nursing facility outside Chattanooga. His name was Harold Pike. He was 81 and recovering from a stroke, but his memory sharpened when Marin placed the affidavit in front of him. I never wrote that, he said. His right hand trembled above the signature. That's my name, but not my handwriting. He remembered working for Grant Whitlock's firm during that period. Most assignments came through email. He had once been asked to certify service on an abandoned parcel after being told the owner could not be located. I refused, Harold said. You cannot serve an empty house. 3 days later, his company terminated him. The affidavit appeared in court the following week. Before we left, Harold gave Marin access to an old backup drive his daughter had kept from his business. Inside was the original email from Grant's office. The subject line read, Avery's service problem, alternate affidavit required. Attached was a draft certificate naming Lester Avery before any service supposedly occurred. Grant had not recorded a successful delivery. He had written it in advance. The next layer waited inside Eastbrook's petition. To obtain a default judgment, the developer had sworn that the Eastern Ridge was abandoned, unmanaged, and no longer claimed by any known Avery heir. The supporting witness was Celeste Barrington. Her affidavit described collapsed fences, unpaid taxes, and land untouched for decades. Every statement was false. Tobias's tax receipts covered every year. Forestry permits documented controlled timber cuts. County fire records showed him maintaining the Ridge Road each spring. The final inspection occurred 4 months before his death. Celeste had not misunderstood the property. She had lied about what she saw. Then Isaac Fenwick called. He had begun reconstructing Briarhaven's recorded plat using public documents and aerial surveys. His voice sounded tight over the speakerphone. Nolan, the false judgment is carrying more than the houses. What does that mean? The main road, stormwater pond, sewer line, and water system all rely on easements created after Eastbrook took title. So, if the judgment falls, every one of those easements falls with it. Marin stopped writing. Isaac sent the map. Blue lines crossed the screen like veins. Every essential service entered Briarhaven through Avery land. Even the decorative waterfall covering A44 drew from a buried supply line connected to a well on our side of the original boundary. At the bottom of the utility schedule was the company collecting Briarhaven's land security fees. Barrington Resource Trust. Celeste Family Trust. She had testified that the ridge was abandoned, helped Eastbrook obtain the title, then charged residents monthly for access across land she knew had been stolen. The forged signature had taken our property. The easements had turned it into an income stream. The sound of water told me where Celeste had hidden the rest of the fraud. Isaac and I returned to the eastern boundary under a court-approved inspection order 2 days later. A deputy followed us through Briarhaven's stone entrance while cold rain darkened the pavement. The decorative waterfall still poured over A44. Up close, the noise was louder than it should have been. Water rushed through the stacked stone with a steady mechanical pressure, not the uneven flow of a simple recirculating fountain. Isaac crouched beside the lower basin and held a utility locator above the ground. The receiver began clicking. A buried pipe ran beneath the entrance wall, crossed the main road, and disappeared toward the wooded ridge. Celeste watched from the clubhouse steps. Her cream coat was buttoned to her throat. One gloved hand rested against the railing, but her fingers kept tapping the metal. "This inspection concerns a property boundary," she said. "You have no authority to interfere with community utilities." Marin looked at her over the top of the court order. "The utilities are part of the boundary dispute." We followed the line. It led past the tennis courts, beneath a row of ornamental trees, and through a locked service gate behind the clubhouse. The air smelled of wet mulch, chlorine, and hot electrical insulation. Inside the fenced enclosure stood 2 pump housings and a steel pressure tank. A brass plate identified the system as Briarhaven Well Number 1. Isaac checked the coordinates. The well sat 78 feet inside the original Avery boundary. It drew from the same underground spring Tobias had marked in his forestry records 40 years earlier. Celeste had not just helped build homes on our land. She had been selling our water to the people living there. The stormwater pond was worse. Eastbrook's plans described it as community-owned flood protection. Isaac's survey placed the dam, overflow channel, and maintenance access entirely on Avery property. The main sewer line crossed our old fire road before connecting to the county system. The electrical service corridor followed the same path. Briarhaven had one entrance, one water source, one drainage system. Every essential connection depended on rights created by the fraudulent quiet title judgment. Grant Whitlock called them permanent easements. Marin called them contaminated instruments. I stood beside the well enclosure and listened to the pumps vibrate beneath the concrete. For a moment, I imagined switching them off. One locked gate, one shut valve, 73 homes forced to confront the truth before breakfast. Then I pictured Claire's son waking in a cold house with no water. Celeste had already used those families as shields. I was not going to use them as leverage. "We keep everything running," I told Marin. "No road closures. No utility interruption." Celeste laughed from behind us. "How generous of you to permit residents to use their own property." I looked at the pump. "That's the problem, Celeste. You charge them for permission you never owned." Her face tightened. Claire had provided 12 years of HOA statements. Each household paid a monthly land security fee to Barrington Resource Trust. $95 per home. 73 homes. 13 years. More than $1 million. Marin subpoenaed the trust accounts. The first records arrived that evening. HOA payments entered Barrington Resource Trust, moved through 2 management companies, then paid Celeste's mortgage, luxury vehicle lease, political donations, and renovations to a vacation home near Gatlinburg. One transfer carried a note, East Ridge Access Renewal. There had never been a legal access agreement to renew. Celeste had created the false title, built easements on top of it, and collected monthly payments to protect residents from a problem she helped manufacture. The next morning, Claire called from the clubhouse parking lot. Her voice was low and urgent. Celeste scheduled an emergency board session. She says they need to remove outdated files before the state audit. Through the phone, I heard cardboard boxes sliding across concrete. Then an industrial shredder started screaming behind the building. Celeste had spent 13 years building her authority on paper. Now she was trying to destroy it before we could read the final page. I did not shut off Briarhaven's water. I shut down Celeste's story instead. Marin filed an emergency motion before the shredder finished its first box. Claire's phone captured the sound, the loading carts, and 2 board members carrying archive bins through the clubhouse service door. By noon, the judge had signed a preservation order covering every HOA email, invoice, computer, utility contract, and financial record. State investigators arrived before Celeste's staff could move the remaining boxes. She called it routine housekeeping. The investigators called it potential destruction of evidence. While they secured the clubhouse, Marin and I worked at Tobias's kitchen table. The room smelled of coffee, wood smoke, and printer ink. Maps covered one end. Resident account statements covered the other. We need to separate the families from the title fraud, I said. Marin looked over her glasses. That means giving them rights before the court decides whether they already have them. It means Celeste cannot threaten them with me anymore. We drafted a temporary non-disturbance covenant. Every Briarhaven household could remain in place while the case proceeded. Nobody would lose road access, water, sewer service, or electricity. No family would owe me rent. No lien would be placed against an occupied home. Residents who joined the title claim would receive corrected ownership documents after the court approved a settlement. Marin read the final paragraph twice. You are taking away your strongest leverage. No, I said. I'm taking away hers. Claire delivered the first copies that evening. At first, doors stayed closed. Residents watched through curtains while she placed white envelopes beneath porch lights. Some had spent weeks hearing that I planned to lock the gate and drain the water system. They expected demands. Instead, they found protection. By morning, Marin's office had received 23 calls. By afternoon, 51 families had signed. People who had shouted at me during Celeste's meeting began sending mortgage files, HOA invoices, and old board emails. One retired accountant uploaded 13 years of financial reports. A former board secretary provided minutes Celeste had ordered removed from the resident portal. Fear was changing sides. Claire found the message that broke Briarhaven open. It was buried inside an archived board packet from the year before construction began. Celeste had written it to Grant Whitlock and an Eastbrook executive after an attorney questioned the Avery ownership records. The email contained one sentence. Once the houses are occupied, no judge will unwind the project. Below it, Grant replied, proceed before the heirs organize. Marin printed both messages and placed them beside the forged service affidavit. Celeste had known, not after the homes were sold, before the first foundation was poured. That evening, Celeste posted a video from the clubhouse steps. Her hair was perfect. Her voice was calm. Only the pulse moving in her neck betrayed her. She called my covenant an illegal takeover attempt. She warned residents that signing it could invalidate their mortgages. Then she announced an emergency community vote. Every household would be assessed $12,500 to fund Briarhaven's defense against what she called the Avery land seizure. 73 homes. More than $900,000. Money she intended to use to defend herself. Claire watched the video beside me in Tobias's workshop. She still thinks they'll vote for it, she said. She thinks they're still afraid of me. A message appeared on Claire's phone. It came from a maintenance employee inside the clubhouse. Attached was a photograph of Celeste's private meeting notes. At the top, underlined twice, were 4 words, pass assessment before receivership. Marin read it and reached for her coat. The preservation order had protected the records. The residents had protected one another. Now we needed the court to protect Briarhaven from the woman still controlling its money. Celeste had scheduled her final vote for Friday night. She believed the meeting would save her authority. We were going to use it to end it. $12,500 from every household, Celeste announced, or Nolan Avery takes your homes. Her voice filled the Briarhaven clubhouse with practiced certainty. Rain hammered the windows. Wet coats steamed beneath the ceiling vents. 73 families faced the podium, white covenant envelopes resting on laps and folding chairs. Behind Celeste, a screen displayed one phrase in red, Emergency Defense Assessment. Grant Whitlock sat beside her with 3 binders stacked before him. He avoided looking at the residents. Celeste gripped the podium. This assessment protects our roads, utilities, and property values from an outsider attempting to seize control. Claire stood near the center aisle. Why did your trust collect our land security fees? Celeste's smile remained fixed. That money preserved lawful community access. Access across Nolan's land. Murmurs moved through the room. Celeste raised her voice. Mr. Avery's documents are disputed. Signing his so-called covenant may invalidate your mortgages and expose every family here to eviction. The rear doors opened. Marin entered first, carrying a black case. Isaac followed with a survey tube beneath one arm. Behind them came two representatives from the title insurers, a state investigator, and the receiver appointed by the court that afternoon. I walked in last. The room fell silent. Celeste pointed toward me. He is prohibited from interfering with HOA business. The receiver placed a certified order on the podium. As of 4:16 this afternoon, the board's financial authority has been suspended pending investigation. Grant opened his mouth. The investigator handed him a subpoena. Celeste stared at the order without touching it. Marin connected her laptop to the projector. The red assessment slide disappeared. In its place appeared the original Avery deed, the recorded bearings, and the county tax history showing continuous ownership. Isaac unrolled the reconstructed boundary map across a display board. Briarhaven's houses, road, well, stormwater pond, and sewer corridor glowed in red inside the Avery tract. Then he placed a sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside lay the bronze cap marked A44. Celeste's fingers stopped moving. This marker has occupied the same recorded coordinate since 1969, Isaac said. The decorative waterfall was constructed around it. Marin displayed the quiet title service affidavit, the demolished address, the dead identification holder, the invented name Lester Avery. Harold Pike's original email appeared next, showing Grant's office had drafted the false affidavit before service supposedly occurred. Residents turned toward him. Grant loosened his tie. That communication is being misinterpreted. Marin changed slides. Celeste's sworn statement declaring the ridge abandoned appeared beside Tobias's tax receipts, forestry permits, fire road inspections, and film footage of A44. Then came the email. Once the houses are occupied, no judge will unwind the project. Claire read it aloud. The silence afterward felt heavier than shouting. Celeste stepped away from the podium. That was a planning discussion taken out of context. The final screen showed bank transfers from HOA accounts into Barrington Resource Trust, then into Celeste's mortgage, vehicle lease, political donations, and vacation home renovations. More than $1 million. An elderly resident removed his board support ribbon and dropped it onto the floor. Others followed. Celeste looked around the room as if the people had betrayed her. You need me, she said. Without this board, Briarhaven loses everything. No, I said. Without your board, Briarhaven stops paying for a fraud you created. The receiver canceled the assessment vote and froze every discretionary account. Residents demanded a removal ballot anyway. The result was 71-2. Celeste turned toward the side exit, but the state investigator was already standing there with a warrant authorizing seizure of her records and devices. Nobody blocked her. Nobody needed to. As she surrendered her phone, the artificial waterfall outside suddenly stopped. The pumps fell silent under the rain. For 13 years, Celeste had hidden A44 beneath moving water. Now the marker sat beneath the meeting room lights, while every family finally saw the boundary she had tried to drown. The first corrected deed cost Claire Donnelly $1. She placed the bill on Tobias's kitchen table 22 months after the night Celeste lost control of Briarhaven Ridge. Beside it lay the court-approved settlement, the revised subdivision plat, and permanent utility easements thick enough to fill 3 binders. Claire signed her name. Marin notarized the final page. Then I handed Claire legal ownership of the ground beneath her home. For a moment, she only stared at the deed. My son's room, she asked. Yours. The yard. Yours. The land under all of it. I slid her brass house key across the table. Open the door and see. She laughed through tears, closed her fingers around the key, and pressed the deed against her chest. The title insurers funded most of the settlement after investigators confirmed that Eastbrook had developed Briarhaven through a judgment obtained with fraudulent service. Eastbrook's remaining assets were liquidated. Grant Whitlock surrendered his law license rather than face a disciplinary hearing over the fabricated affidavit. Celeste was charged with fraud, perjury, conspiracy, and misuse of HOA funds. Barrington Resource Trust was dissolved. Her vacation home was sold, her accounts were frozen, and more than $1 million in land security fees was returned to the residents through the settlement. Nobody lost a home. Nobody lost water. Nobody woke to a locked road. After the court approved the corrected plat and the lenders signed the replacement title documents, every Briarhaven family received a clean deed for one symbolic dollar. I transferred the main road, well site, stormwater pond, sewer corridor, and fire access route to a nonprofit utility cooperative owned equally by the residents. The easements were recorded properly this time, with public maps, clear boundaries, and language preventing any future board from selling or mortgaging them in secret. Briarhaven Ridge HOA held one final meeting. The clubhouse smelled of coffee, fresh lumber, and rain drifting through the open doors. No security guards stood near the podium. No attorney whispered instructions from the front row. The residents voted 71-2 to dissolve the association. They kept the utility cooperative and eliminated everything else. No private enforcement officers. No invented land security fees. No fines for mailbox colors or grass height. Claire became the cooperative's first elected treasurer. A week later, Isaac and I returned A44 to the Eastern Ridge. The bronze cap settled into its original coordinate beside the old oak. We packed red soil around its base and installed a protective survey box that could be opened only in the presence of the county surveyor. Then I removed Celeste's warning sign from the tree. The bolts squealed as they came free. Rust stains ran down the bark beneath the words, "Trespassers will be prosecuted." I carried the sign into Tobias's workshop, sanded away the black paint, and turned it over. On the clean side, I carved a new message. Avery land access by recorded right, not assumed power. We mounted it beside A44. The artificial waterfall at Briarhaven's entrance was never restarted. The stone remained, but the hidden pipe was disconnected and the bronze marker stayed visible beneath open sky. That afternoon, Claire drove through the entrance with her son beside her. He lowered the window and waved the brass key like a trophy. Behind them, porch lights came on across 73 homes that finally stood on honest paper. Celeste believed enough roofs could turn a false deed into the truth. She believed occupied houses would make judges afraid to ask who owned the ground. She was wrong. Ownership is not decided by how much concrete you pour, how many families you frighten, or how official your paperwork appears. It is decided by the rights you actually possess. I stood beneath my grandfather's oak and listened to wind move through the branches where hammers had once announced Celeste's authority. Justice had not needed to evict anyone. It had only needed one family to keep its records, one community to stop believing a lie, and one boundary marker that refused to disappear.